There are literally thousands of reptiles that you could possibly own, and most of them make great pets, but there are certain ones nobody should own. And today, we're going over the top 5 reptiles nobody should have in their personal collection. My name's Adam, this is Diamond, you're watching Wickens Wicked Reptiles, stick around. Thank you to Audible for sponsoring today's episode. So to be perfectly clear, this video isn't a video about banning reptiles. I don't think there should be any bans. We should self-police. Let's make that very clear. I'm not lobbying towards that at all. I'm just saying that these reptiles, most people with 2 brain cells they could rub together wouldn't try to keep in a personal collection unless they're the 1% of people who are dedicated enough to do so. And even then, some of these on the list, there's nobody dedicated enough because it's impossible to do. So let's just get started. Oh, and I'm talking about private collections. Zoos are different. Okay, for real, let's start. So number 5, marine iguanas. We've talked about these guys way long ago. They are very specialized species. These guys come from the Galapagos Islands, which if you're not aware, is one of the most unique types of biodiversity in terms of the animals that are found on that island or that chain of islands. Even the plants are very unique, and that is one of the main things that makes keeping marine iguanas in captivity nearly impossible, especially for personal collections. Now there are zoos that have them and can facilitate, but even then it's really rare. And the number one reason, in my opinion, or I guess common sense opinion, is their very specialized diet. Because if you look at them, they look not that unique. I mean, they kind of look like a rock iguana, sort of, like kind of similar. Now these guys are aquatic, right? So they are going to be basking on rocks near the sea, like salt water. They're going to dive into that sea to not only cool down, but also eat their very specialized diet. Green and red sea algae is what they eat. Now, if it weren't for that, maybe you could keep them. They're only about 5 feet, maybe a little bit smaller, including the tail, which is more than half of their body length. So it's not really that big of a deal to keep in captivity, or you'd think anyway, right? But the difference is these guys have that specialized diet and they need a saltwater type enclosure. Who do you know that has a saltwater type enclosure like this big enough for a 5-foot lizard? I mean, it's one thing to have a saltwater reef tank. Even if you had like a 120, 150, 300 gallon aquarium, that's big by anyone's standard, but that's not even close to big enough for a marine iguana. And if you're really serious about recreating the natural habitat for these animals, starting from babies to being adults, as babies, they're gonna eat feces from other marine iguanas, so you need a supply of that. And as they get older, they require tons of space for natural activity. That's what we're trying to do, is give them the option to do that, all animals, right? But how are you gonna get them to be able to dive very deep? We're talking about 25 to 100 feet sometimes for their food, and they can hold their breath for 15 to 30, even longer minutes. Longer minutes? 15 to 30 minutes or longer? English is hard. So I just don't think it's realistic for anybody in a private collection to take care of a marine iguana. Number 4, sea snakes. I'm gonna group them all together. There's many species of sea snakes. Almost all of them are venomous elapids. So like a cobra or a coral snake, those are elapids, right? Well, same thing. Kraits and other sea snakes are elapids, mostly. These snakes are going to swim almost always. They're almost never gonna be found on land, ever. You're gonna find these in the Indian Pacific Oceans, and they are going to have tons of area to swim, and they will use it. Obviously, they have lots of area, but they do use it. They will swim for hundreds of kilometers in their life. How are you gonna recreate that? I mean, what type of enclosure do you have that would allow them to swim even 1 kilometer in a day? You don't. So I think maybe aquariums could facilitate this, but again, you need a saltwater receptacle, a huge saltwater receptacle. Now this is a little bit easier considering you don't have to have a land area or have a very little land area because they're almost never going to use it. So it makes it a little bit easier than a marine iguana, but also they have a very specialized diet. They're gonna eat things like fish and octopus and squid sometimes, things like that. That's what they're going to eat. I don't know anyone who has an octopus supply for eating that is a personal collection. But no matter how you slice it, a 4 to 5 foot snake on average is It's just not easy to facilitate that in an aquarium because you're going to need a huge aquarium. And not only that, their specialized diet, that's one thing, saltwater supply, that's another thing, but their care isn't known that well. Most people don't know how to take care of these, even experts. It is very specialized, their type of care, and that's why you don't see them in a ton of aquariums. They're just hard to care for and hard to keep alive. If you're wondering how I learned about some of these animals, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and the way that I like to do that is with today's sponsor, Audible. Audible is the #1 source of spoken word entertainment all in one place. At Audible, you can find the largest selection of audiobooks ranging from bestsellers to new releases to celebrity memoirs, languages, business, motivation, even podcasts. If there's something that you want to listen to on your evening walk, while you're working, on your drive to work, you can do that through Audible. As an Audible member, you'll get 1 credit every month, good for any title in the entire premium selection. And new members can always try Audible for 30 days on us. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I rip around on my one wheel all the time with headphones in, and what I'm listening to are usually podcasts on Audible, but one of my favorite books that I just got into again is The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. If you struggle with procrastination, kind of like I do, this is a book that breaks down the barriers, explains to you why you procrastinate and how to avoid doing it, how to stop the trend. I have been much more productive, and it's read in Steven Pressfield's voice. That's my favorite part about Audible, is many of the books are read by the actual author, and this makes me feel like it actually means something. The guy who wrote the words is speaking them to me. And at Audible, the new Plus category makes Audible membership so much more valuable and gives all members a chance to listen to and discover new favorites and new formats, like the exclusive Words Plus music series or podcasts that you've never considered before. I find a lot of things, including new comedians who put their work on Audible that I would have never found elsewhere. So visit audible.com/wickedreptiles today, or text Wicked Reptiles to 500-500 to start. I love Audible. Go to audible.com/wickedreptiles or text Wicked Reptiles to 500-500 and let's get started. Number 3, this one doesn't need much explanation. Thorny Devils. These guys are from Australia, very unique, have a funny shaped head. They look similar to horned lizards in North America, but these guys, their defense mechanism isn't shooting blood from their eyes. They have like a second head projection on the back of their neck. So they'll stick their real head down and then they have this second head. It's kind of like to ward off predators or predators to attack the wrong thing, that type of thing. They move very weird, so they're very cool. It's one of my favorite reptiles. I remember as a kid watching documentaries just about this one species and lots of other shows that included this species. They're one of the coolest lizards on Earth, but they have a very specialized diet. Are you getting a trend here, right? The thing is, they eat certain species of ants. So even if you had them and you had an anthill in your backyard and you lived in Minnesota, Texas, wherever, who knows if they're going to eat those ants, because it's very specialized, the species that they're going to eat. They're not just going to eat every species of ant. You need the right ones. So unless your name is Mikey Bustos running Ants Canada, how are you supposed to have enough ants to feed this thing, or the right kinds? It's just not realistic, because they will eat hundreds, if not thousands of ants every single day. Where are you going to get those ants? Not only that, but they're a little bit fragile. There's not really a lot of care known about them in terms of care information, I should say. I could beat this to death, but it's pretty clear why you only find these in some zoos, and even then it's really rare outside of Australia. Number 2, sea turtles. This is pretty obvious. Some sea turtles, there's 7 species by the way, some of them will get up to 500 pounds, so let's just start there. Where are you going to put a 500-pound fully aquatic turtle that only comes on land to lay eggs? Where are you going to put that exactly? You can't. That's why most aquariums don't have the larger varieties of sea turtles. And even most aquariums don't have sea turtles. They're difficult. Saltwater, again, very unique diet, again, mollusks, sea sponges, things like that. Things that are difficult to get in captivity. So I don't really think anybody in their private collection is owning especially the larger types of sea turtles, but even the smaller ones, they need hundreds or thousands of miles, whatever metric, why don't you guys use metric? Come on, miles that they're going to swim. You don't have miles available to you. Sorry. I mean, even if you have a beachfront property and you got miles of ocean, how are you going to contain, like, it's just not realistic to do. So sea turtles, they're amazing, they're beautiful, but most of them are endangered, and you do find them everywhere, which is really cool. So if you wanted to see a sea turtle, You can go to the Atlantic Ocean, Pacific, they like all of them are found actually in American waters. So you can see every species of sea turtle in the world in American waters. So that's pretty cool, right? Even I live in Canada. If I go to the east or west coast, there's sea turtles to be found. So it's very interesting that this species exists and how they exist and how they eat and breed and the whole thing. But sea turtles are not for basically anybody. I feel like I'm rushing through this list, but it's pretty obvious and clear. But number one is gonna take you by surprise because we don't ever talk about this type of animal ever. And that's number one. The most ridiculous, never should be kept in private collections almost always, except for 1% of people, reptile, raptors. Not like raptors. I'm talking about raptors like birds of prey. Now, I'm a big fan of raptors, right? I've got a hawk and an eagle tattooed on my chest. Like, I am a big fan. I think that they are the coolest, but I would never, ever keep them in captivity, ever. Unless your name is Chandler. I mean, you need a sanctuary. You can't just have these in your basement or in your backyard or whatever. These are very specialized. They need room to move. You can't just keep them in a coop. You can't keep them in a bird cage like you would with a ringneck parrot or whatever. You need to actually have room for these guys to fly. They need to be exercised. They're very smart. They need something to do. They need a job, basically. Having a raptor, most of them, especially, I don't know, big eagles, owls, things like that, and not giving them something to do is akin to having a working dog and not giving them something to do. They're gonna become stressed, bored, depressed. These animals need something to do. Do you have time and space? Probably not. And overall, it's just expensive to take care of them, right? So I'm not saying that nobody can do it. I'm just saying most people can't do it. Don't keep raptors, please. So there you go. Those are the top 5 reptiles that nobody should own, or except for the 1%. But again, let's self-police. We're not banning things. We're not registering things. I'm not trying to get the government involved. Leave us alone. We don't need help. We just know not to keep marine iguanas, okay? What do you think? What should be on the list? Should there be a part 2? Is there enough animals on the list? Put it in the comment section below. If you don't mind, hit like and subscribe. Really helps the channel out. Diamond says that he won't cry himself to sleep if you do, so do, please. And a special thanks to the Patreon supporters. You guys are freaking amazing. You guys do so much for this channel, and I love sharing things that I don't share on the channel, on Patreon. I got a brand new enclosure build that I'm doing, which I only show on Patreon. You get discounts on the merch. The tanks are finally in. You get new about animals in my collection I don't talk about. For as little as $1 a month, you can be part of that too. And that's it. Because I do videos twice a week, that means that I'll see you in the next one.